Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the MJ Innocent podcast. I'm your host, Moonwalker Tanya. All right, so I want to say thank you to everyone who voted on the community tab, unless you're someone I blocked, then otherwise your vote means nothing to me. All right, so in this episode, we are going to talk about why I do not doubt Michael's innocence, not even by 5%. Now, it would be easier for the MJ haters to say, oh, she just doesn't want to listen to the other side, even though I did. Or it's because she's a fan, or because she loves Michael. Even though I do love Michael, and I am a proud fan, it actually has nothing to do with it. The reason why I don't doubt Michael's innocence is because of the accusers themselves. Because not only did they have multiple inconsistencies regarding the allegations, they lied about things that weren't even allegation related. For example, in the mockumentary, Wade and James claimed they attended a cookout in 2008, and Michael was there. Well, Bill Whitfield, who was in charge of Michael's schedule from 2006 to 2009, said that no such thing happened. Stephanie Safechuck lied about the house loan. She said in 1992, Michael loaned them a loan for a house with a very low interest rate, which was very generous on his part. And they had a contract that the Safechucks would pay Michael back. Then they testified in 93. Stephanie said, when it was all said and done, Michael forgave the debt. He said, oh, I don't want you to pay me anymore. It's a gift. Well, there's a problem with that. The settlement was finalized in 94. Michael didn't forgive the debt until 1997. So from 1992 to 1997, Michael was expecting the Safechucks to pay him back. But when he forgave the debt, it wasn't because they testified in 93. It was because the Safechucks did not pay Michael back at all in those 5 years. Not a single payment. They completely took advantage of him. And Michael made a mistake by not suing them. But unfortunately, he was a people pleaser. He didn't like to upset people. And so he made that big mistake, but he did distance himself from the Safechucks, which they obviously did not like. But that's what happens when you betray someone's trust. They will distance themselves from you. And you only have yourself to blame. And then it's kind of like when James claimed that Michael and his lawyers were constantly calling him, saying, like, you need to testify. Well, James was eliminated long before the trial even started. And I remember back in 2019 to 2020, there was a paid troll that I used to argue with all the time. And they said, well, how long was he eliminated before the trial? Because there was quite a distance. I was like, did you not even know what James said in the mockumentary? He said, even towards the end of the trial, Michael and his lawyers were constantly calling him. Why would Michael call James to ask him to testify when he was already eliminated as a possible witness long before the trial even started? Wade lied about attending a dinner where Michael was completely out of it. He said it happened before he testified, and when he saw his interactions with Paris, it made him believe that he had to testify, even though he didn't want to. Even though that's a lie, too. He volunteered to testify. And he did not receive the subpoena by the defense, like he claimed. It was from the prosecution. But Todd Jackson, who was at the dinner in question, said that the dinner took place after Michael was acquitted, not before Wade testified. And before he quit his 2011 job, Wade was supposed to work with Britney Spears again. But he claimed he walked away from that job when in reality, she fired him. Dan Reed even tried to say that Wade walked away from the Cirque du Soleil Michael Jackson 1 job when Wade never had that job. And when Wade tried to write his book, he said it wasn't about money, even though he only went to the highest paying publishers around, and they all rejected him. So then he pulled the book. And then, when the judge wanted to know about the book, Wade said, "I didn't write a book." Wade said that he was taught to hate women when he was literally in a relationship with Brandy Jackson during the same years in question. And most importantly, Wade even lied about how the alleged abuse even started. He said it started when his family went to the Grand Canyon and he stayed behind at the ranch. But every time when Joy Robson testified, it was in 93, 05, and even in 2016, after her son changed his story, she said everyone, including Wade, went on that trip. But then 2 or 3 months after she testified in 2016, she was in front of the camera for the mockumentary, and she said Wade stayed behind at the ranch. So what's the difference? When she testified, she was under oath. When you're in front of that camera, you don't have to tell the truth. So, if you are going to lie about how the alleged abuse started, that's telling me that maybe we shouldn't take anything you say seriously, Wade. Same thing with you, James. You know, and plus, a lot of people try to make it sound like Wade and James are successful. I mean, James was an actor when he was a kid, but he's been a nobody since the 90s. Hollywood wanted nothing to do with him. You know, it's been 30 years. And then they try to say that Wade was a successful choreographer, but he destroyed his career in the early 2000s. That was over 20 years ago. He's a nobody. They're both nobodies. And Wade's wife has to work at least 2 jobs while Wade does nothing. He lives in Hawaii, which was another stupid decision. It just reminds me of John List all over again. You know, Wade cannot either find work or keep a job, but he buys a home in Hawaii, which is extremely expensive. And I do not believe Wade and Amanda are paying their bills on their own. I do not believe that. When Wade started his first charity, the only thing he did was create a Facebook page for it and did nothing else with it. After the mockumentary, he created his second fake charity. He originally called it the Robson Family Fund, but then he was criticized, obviously, because that was a stupid name to give his own scam. And then he changed it. But if you look at the page, the minimum donation amount that he asks for is $250. Then it goes to $500 and then $1,000. I have donated to many charities throughout my life, and it has never been a minimum of $250. The minimum was usually like $19 or $20 or $25. And also, Wade and James are doing online/hotline scams where it literally says on their website that even though they are not licensed counselors, they can help people with any problem imaginable. If it's that simple, then how come therapists and counselors, how come they need either their master's degree or their PhD? And depending on how much you make, they will charge you $100 to $250 an hour. And they also charge people $50 just to send them an email. I know Michael made mistakes in his life. He was too trustworthy. He was naive at times. He let the wrong people into his life. But I do not believe he was a pedophile. If people want to say the sleepovers were inappropriate, I don't care. I'm perfectly fine with that. You can say that the sleepovers were inappropriate. But you can't use that as evidence. Now, haters have been asking me ever since the beginning, when I joined the community in 2019, what would it take for me to question Michael's innocence? Well, it's very simple. You don't make mockumentaries. You do not sue the estate for $1.5 billion. You do what the court system wants you to do. For example, Wade claimed he was penetrated. Have a physical. Or, since your bottom would have been destroyed, show us any hospital records because you would have to have surgery. Have a physical to try to find a possible scar. But Wade refused. When James claimed that Michael and his lawyers were constantly calling him, threatening him to testify during 2005. Show us the phone records, James. And when he was talking about that stupid ring, prove that Michael bought it, and then take a lie detector test asking, did Michael buy that for you in exchange for molestation? But James isn't going to do that. No. And, speaking of polygraphs, the judge wanted Wade and James to take a lie detector test when their stories constantly changed and continued to fall apart. But they didn't take it when they claimed they're telling the truth. If you are not doing what the court system wants you to do, how do you expect people to even give you 5% of support? I have done 7 years of research. I've looked at both sides of the story. And I'll admit, if I didn't do research and I just watched the mockumentary, I probably would have fallen for it, which is why I'm glad I did my work before it. So I can't be manipulated into believing some bullshit. And I know I said I was going to stop cursing. I'm sorry. But I had to let that one out. So to Wade and James, I think you are a disgrace to real survivors. Because when I was sexually assaulted and sexually harassed, no one could silence me. And most importantly, I didn't want anyone to be abused after me. Now, the classmate who dry humped me, he was expelled 2 years later, but it was for something different. But I considered that justice for what he did to me as well. And as far as the teacher who sexually harassed me, I tried to go to the principal literally the next day. I wasn't sure how far he was going to take it, but I didn't want either myself or anyone to possibly be abused. And I know some haters will say, well, maybe they didn't tell you that it was love and you shouldn't tell anybody. Shut up. Even if they did say that stuff to me, I would still come forward. And yeah, I was a teenager, but then what's Wade and James's excuses then? They didn't come forward until they were in their 30s. I know sometimes victims can realize that they were abused later on in life. I know that happens at times. But I've talked to a lot of real survivors who knew it was wrong. And plus, when Wade and James were questioned both in 93 and in 05, well, technically Wade was in both, but anyway, they were asked very specific questions. They did not just say, were you molested by Michael Jackson? No, they went into graphic details in the questions. So they knew what child molestation was. So the 05 trial and 93 were their opportunities to come forward. Tom Sneddon even had a hotline where people could call and be anonymous and say that Michael abused them. But nobody did it. And then obviously the haters, they always criticize the fans because we say that they're after money. And there's one hater who literally said, I don't think Wade and James need the money. So gullible. And yeah, in the second mockumentary, we saw James with a BMW and a Rolex watch. Well, like I said, how do we know those things even belong to him? Because when the fans accused those two of only wanting money after the first mockumentary, James could easily have borrowed those things from somebody to try to make people think, see, we don't need the money, even though we're suing for a large amount of it. And some people say, well, Michael isn't here, so what else is there to go for? Name one person who didn't want money when they accused Michael when he was alive. We'll wait. All right, so with that being said, to Wade and James, unless you have a physical to show any possible markings or anything like that, any hospital records, phone records, or if you are strapped to a lie detector test and take the most brutal lie detector test imaginable multiple times to either prove whether if you are victims or if you're just liars like we believe you are. But since you refuse to do all those things, that right there is why I refuse to doubt Michael's innocence, not even by 5%. My biggest fear is that Michael would be convicted of something that he didn't do, and he's not even here to defend himself. This lawsuit is an insult to real survivors. And then some will say, well, if they're lying, then why have they been telling the same story for 12 years? May I remind you that they wasted 10 to 11 years constantly asking for extensions. It wasn't the estate doing that. No, it was Wade and James. When they went to court, extension. A few months later, they go to court, extension. The next time they go to court, extension. If they were real victims, they wouldn't be asking for extensions for all these years. I am sick and tired of it. And I have to tell you, though, my passion to defend Michael only gets stronger every day. But I will admit that if one day we are proven wrong, that Michael actually is guilty, I will apologize to them, even though it will be the hardest thing I would ever have to do in my life. But I'm not worried. Because like I said, they haven't done anything whatsoever to make me want to doubt Michael's innocence. And if they were willing to take a polygraph or to have a physical, I'll admit, I would change my opinion from maybe 100% innocent to maybe 95 or even 90%. Only because if they agreed to do it, I'm willing to keep an open mind about it. But when they refused, why should I give Michael's innocence any doubt? If you're telling the truth, then why are you refusing to do these things? Telling detailed stories that could possibly be made up, which I do believe they are, because there's no way they're doing this alone. So, I hope that answers your question. I am not afraid to defend Michael Jackson. I am proud that I'm doing this. Because not only did I want to be a defense lawyer, I am a real survivor. I have a lot of friends who are real survivors. There are even people who are not Michael Jackson fans who support Michael. I've talked to people who haven't even done research on the allegations, and even they don't believe it. When Wade and James made those mockumentaries, they were depending on the people who didn't know anything and would be so blinded by the graphic stories and all these other things and their fake emotions to manipulate them into believing it. So to anyone who questions Michael's innocence more than, well, let's just say if you think he's guilty more than 20%, then you seriously need to do more research. And listening to the media and listening to the haters is not a good idea. They are not going to tell the truth. And also, looking at the Neverland 5 is also not a good way to look either. Alright, guys. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Please let me know what you think about this in the comments. And we are 10 days away from the anniversary of when Michael was acquitted of 14 counts. Not 10, not 13, but 14. All right, guys. I love you, and I will see you in the comments.